You're listening to a CNA podcast.
So, when you're choosing what you eat, do you try and make sustainable choices? Stop for a minute and think about how many of these you might do. Choose an alternative milk for your coffee. Have a meat-free day, or try a plant-based meat in your burger. Eat an insect snack instead of potato chips. Food has such an outsized impact on greenhouse gas emissions. And today, we're tucking in to alternative foods. Hello and welcome to Climate Conversations. I'm Jack Board in Bangkok and hello Liling Tan in Singapore. Liling, what's your normal coffee order in a morning?
It has to be kopi peng, which is vernacular for iced coffee. Usually comes with milk and sugar. I go for the regular milk too, Jack. The unadulterated, full-fat cow milk. What about you, Jack?
I am pretty glued on to a double shot latte. Being an Australian, we are coffee snobs. We're very particular about our coffee, where the beans come from. But I am a normal milk kind of guy. I'm not using any of these fancy milks, unlike a lot of my friends. And we'll get to that a bit later about whether that's a good idea for the planet or not. Okay, let's roll into our weekly quiz. Liling, you've been on a bit of a hot streak, so I'm turning the difficulty and the fun up a notch.
Bring it on.
All right. Can you rank these 4 foods by the greenhouse gases emitted during their production? So 4 foods I want from least to most greenhouse gases. We've got chicken, we've got rice, we've got cheese, and we've got coffee.
All right.
Answers at the end. Actually, it's not easy.
No, it's not.
Okay, it's news time. Let's run through some of the interesting recent sustainability stories from the newsroom. Liling, over to you.
Gearing up for greener flights, Singapore Airlines is in a deal to buy 1,000 tons of sustainable aviation fuel, known as SAF, and that will be from oil refining company Neste of Finland. Now, how much is 1,000 tons? Well, to put it in context, a one-way flight on a Boeing 777 from Singapore to Hong Kong consumes about 21 to 23 tons of jet fuel. Now, using that example, how much SAF is used would depend on the blend or mix, which could be anywhere from 1% to 50% SAF. Jack, can you name 3 feedstocks that SAF is made from that makes it a cleaner fuel?
Now you're turning the tables. You're
right.
starting to quiz me. I'm not prepared. I don't know. I don't know what type of feedstocks are being used, but please inform me. It's interesting.
So yes, they use a lot of waste and residue products. So we're talking about used cooking oil, animal and fish fat residue, some of the stuff left behind from biomass from vegetable oil production, and all of this instead of using fossil fuels. So the companies say that this unblended SAF can reduce gas emissions by up to 80% compared to the old jet fuel made from petroleum. It's mind-blowing, but still, SAF isn't something that's being widely adopted yet due to its low supply and high cost.
Interesting.
Now, the other thing that caught my eye was that the king of fruits is no match for the heat wave hammering Thailand in your neck of the woods. Now, hot weather and drought conditions have been taking a huge bite get that? Out of durian production. The heat is resulting in smaller durians, and the lack of rain also means farmers now have to buy water and truck it all the way into the plantations. So this is really hitting hard at the farmers, the industry, and the kingdom. And Jack, you may know this already, I'm sure you do. Thailand's durian exports are worth billions of dollars, and it's the country's 3rd most valuable agricultural product after rice and rubber. So if you do manage to get your hands on durians this season, that's something to think about when you chow down on that rich, creamy, yummy morsels.
No.
All right.
I will not be
fan.
chowing down on any durian anytime
Oh.
soon. Not a fan.
You're missing out. All right.
Let's go to our main story this week. So, just before our recording, I decided to go down to the local 7-Eleven. As you know, in Bangkok, they're everywhere. And I was on the lookout for bugs, bug snacks in particular. And in my neighborhood, there was nothing to be found. They used to have these packets of silkworms and
Ew.
crickets.
Yuck.
And I'm sad to report we won't be eating any of those today, Li-Ling. You wouldn't have got to eat them anyway, but you could have
I
watched
won't have
me
to
eat
listen
them.
to you eating and watch you eating them. Yeah.
Insects as food is one of the topics we're going to chat about today. And then we're also going to discuss meat and milk and how these alternative foods as industries are evolving and the types of impacts they may have on the global climate picture. So it was about a decade ago already that Thailand was deemed to be one of the few countries in the world to have developed a viable and thriving insect farming sector, according to the United Nations. Now, insect consumption here is part of the culture of many communities, and the farmed insect export market is growing fast, with the US actually being the country's biggest buyer.
Oh, wow.
For a whole range of goods. Now, yeah, there are snacks, which we've already noted that you're not keen on, but also insects are being used in pet food, in protein powder, and in animal feed. So I've actually been to an insect snack processing factory here in Thailand, which is really interesting, seeing how they're growing the crickets that they then fry and package up. They tasted all right.
But you didn't go back to buy them?
I didn't buy them when I saw them in the 7-Eleven after that. But I also went to an insect-based degustation restaurant in Bangkok a few years ago. So think scallops, Jerusalem artichokes, and bamboo caterpillars. And they also had crab and giant water beetle ravioli.
Was it all mushed up or did they still look like bugs?
It was a giant bug on top of the ravioli.
Oh, what was it like? Describe it.
Things like ant caviar on top of your beautiful grilled fish.
Oh, wow.
It was interesting. It was high-end dining for sure. I could see the promise in trying to get people to be less grossed out by eating insects.
Speaking of grossed out, how big was that water bug?
Oh, it was massive. It's like the main protein course on your plate. A huge beetle.
Oh my goodness, it was like an insect steak. Did you have to cut into it with your knife and fork? And
Yeah, you had to use a knife and fork to cut it up.
What was it like? How was it? Was it braised? Was it fried? Was it sauteed in butter? Come on. Don't hold back.
I don't remember how they prepared
Okay.
the
But was it
beetle.
chewy? What was the texture like?
It's crispy.
Okay.
Crispy.
Yeah. All right.
All right, put that out of your mind and just think. The UN is telling us that promoting insects as food in the face of concerns about global food sustainability and rising hunger is a good idea. Now, insect farming is actually 12 times more efficient than cattle when it comes to converting feed to meat, and it's 4 times more efficient than pigs. And the greenhouse gas output is just a fraction of the large-scale operations that we need for what we'd consider these more conventional proteins. It was interesting to note that a Vietnam-based startup called Cricket One won 1 million Singapore dollars in catalytic funding at the Livability Challenge just last month in Singapore. So there's definitely momentum for companies in this space. Now, of course, the move to alternative meats is a massive thing that we see all the time. So let's talk about what's happening with many companies seemingly popping up with different products everywhere, and a lot of it's happening in Singapore too.
Yeah, let's start with lab-grown meats. There was a lot of talk about alternative meat a few years back in what seemed like an emerging market for lab-grown protein. We had chicken, there was talk of beef and fish and pork. And Jack, did you know that Singapore is the first country to approve the sale of lab-grown chicken?
I would guess that for sure, yeah. And maybe beef as well.
I haven't tried it myself, but I've seen footage of the nuggets. And it's a brand called Good Meat from a company based in San Francisco. Now, this was back in 2020, and it created a lot of buzz. We were all reporting about it. And Singapore was being seen as a test bed for lab-grown protein. Pretty soon we were hearing about other companies working on other meats. There was shiok meats and their cellular technology for shellfish and red meat, and then umami meats with Japanese eel, yellowfin tuna, and red snapper. Some of you have heard other terms for this type of meat. It's cultured meat, cell-based meat, and apparently cultivated meat is the most appetizing term. But call it what you want. These were manufactured in a lab mostly, and the idea is that no animal would be harmed in their production. And also purportedly at lower cost to the environment, less water usage. But even the cost to the environment or the benefits, all that is still debatable. BBC had reported some time back that reducing reliance on land and livestock for meat should cut carbon emissions, but technology needed to create the meat is still too energy intensive to offset the benefit. Taking it to scale or commercializing it has been difficult. And the momentum we saw back in 2022 seems to have slowed from declining investment appetite, geopolitical conflict, and high energy costs have not helped. And globally, there have also been setbacks like bans in Italy and the US state of Florida. So even though there is progress, it seems we're not quite seeing the speed of commercialization that many were hoping for.
It definitely feels like that.
Right.
Always seems to be new companies appearing with new products, but then there isn't the cut through to the consumer on a mainstream basis. Now, what about plant-based meat? We also hear about that a lot. There's companies like Beyond Meats or those Impossible Burgers from Impossible Foods.
Yeah, these guys, they make plant-based beef patties, sausages, chicken, and basically it's meat made from plants. It's available at restaurants already and common in quite a few US restaurant chains and increasingly in Europe as well. They did really well during the COVID-19 pandemic. And you might remember this, Jack, right?
I seem to remember being able to order these types of burgers in Singapore as well. Have you eaten them?
Not knowingly or not intentionally. When I lived in the US, TGI Fridays had it. A lot of these chains had them. And I was reading that, it's starting to gain traction in Europe as well at restaurant chains there.
But not for you, not on your order.
It's not something that I would go out of my way to buy or order. Yeah. You? Have you had it?
Don't think I've even tried it. How shameful. We need to delete all of this because we sound terrible.
There you were judging me. There's also the question about whether, they're really healthier options and how processed they are. So, yeah.
I don't like the idea of vegetables pretending to be meat. If I want meat, I'll eat meat. If I want vegetables, and increasingly we're eating a lot of vegetables, then just let's have them in their unprocessed form. That's kind of my feeling about it.
So we're a little iffy on alternative meats, but what about milk, Jack?
Well, this one also feels like a dilemma. And I do tend increasingly to think about the sustainability of milk a lot, and especially thinking from an animal welfare perspective, which we know in this part of the world is often not great. And trying to navigate the specialty milk section at the supermarket or on the menu at a cafe can be a bit confusing. And there are so many kinds. You must have seen them. Soy milk, oat milk. Now we're seeing hemp milk, pea milks, almond milk, rice milk. The shelves are getting crowded. And it's a sign really that this industry has exploded and the innovation still continues. According to recent reports, the global plant-based milk market is projected to reach $7.3 billion by 2032, and it's growing by about 10% a year. What's clear, though, is that these plant-based milks generally have a lesser impact on the planet. But working that out can be tricky too, as you said, with meat. Each variety has its own footprint, whether it be about land use or water resources or emissions or even the types of packaging or where it comes from. One super interesting statistic, and bear in mind that this survey was done in the US, but what do you think is the top motivation for people changing to non-dairy milk?
Lactose intolerance or weight loss. They want to get healthier, slimmer.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable answer. The most common answer, 55% of respondents said they just like the taste more.
Wow.
And I was puzzled by that. And I have friends who have changed to oat milk, for instance, just because they think it tastes better in their coffee.
I do agree about oat milk, but it also depends on which brand. I did try oat milk for a while because it was starting to get popular in New York where I used to live, and a lot of my friends were converting to it, and I really actually quite liked it. But then I tried a different brand here in Singapore, and it was really hard to drink. And so it really depends on the brand and how they make it.
I've tried quite a few of them. I haven't gone into some of the hemp and pea milks. I just don't really like the taste. Consider this survey. Only 33% of people took the environment into account when they were choosing their milk. And I think I would consider that when I was choosing an alternative milk for sure. But then there's also the price. It's a barrier and something we have to consider.
Yeah.
A 2022 report found that plant-based milks come at an 87% premium compared to dairy milk.
Wow, that's a lot
And that's
more.
really significant.
Yeah.
It is. I was looking at even just buying soy milk for making coffees at home, and it was about 4 times the price at the supermarket, double the price for half the amount. And a lot of this is going to come down to affordability and also personal choice and your priorities. Yeah, as we discussed earlier, I'm dairy milk for now, but I definitely wish there was more transparency and options around the environmental sustainability of common major milk brands. And with more information, I'm ready to be swayed. And I think for good reasons when we look at the overall impact of food production on climate change.
You don't really think that something as basic as the food we're eating is causing this much damage. So a lot of this actually comes from the farming part of it, farming the crop and the livestock, but also from land use changes like deforestation to make room for agriculture, and also in the production processes, the way we consume and eat food, and also the way we dispose of food. Now, the Boston Consulting Group estimates that by capturing just 11% of the protein market in the next decade, alternative proteins can slash greenhouse gases equal to decarbonizing nearly the entire aviation industry.
And one interesting phenomenon that relates to all of this that I've been learning about recently is this idea of nudge theory. This idea that companies and institutions, governments have the ability to gently and softly nudge their consumers to consume less meat and instead turn towards vegetable-based diets or alternative foods. So, as an example, that might be in a restaurant chain, it might be workplace canteens, hospitals, stadiums, or with your in-flight meals. Gradually, more of these choices are being offered to the consumer. So you might have a vegetarian or a vegan option alongside the meat option instead of 2 proteins, for example. And it's happening around the world a lot already. Probably not surprisingly, it's the Scandinavian countries really taking the lead on this. At public functions already in the Norwegian capital of Oslo, meat-free meals are now the default. New York's public hospitals have also set plant-based food as their main option for patients. And Google, in their offices around the world, they're putting meat right down the end of the line at the company canteens.
As simple as that.
Yep, you have to walk past all of the other vegetable-based options before you get to a meat protein. And the idea behind all of this is to encourage behavioral changes to happen naturally and largely without this whole divisive debate, which can break out sometimes around these issues because many people consider like being told to change their diet is controversial, or it could be virtue signaling. Do you think like plant-based food nudging happening in Singapore? Have you seen it happening or around the region? Do you think it's workable in a hawker center or in the MediaCorp canteen, for example?
No. The only person I have conversations about this is you. Yeah. And this nudge theory, I don't know about that because I really like my meat and it would take more than a nudge to get me to change my mind, more like a shove, I think.
But the shove is, that's going to break up your routine. Just a little nudge gradually over the next few years could work.
You have a point there because it really is about visibility and getting used to it, right? If plant-based food, alternative meats are on the menu increasingly, or if they're being served at these functions you're talking about or corporate events, I'd try it. If I'm hungry enough, I'd eat anything. And if I like it, I'd come back for more. So there's your nudge theory.
I think if there's one thing that we as food consumers can take home, it's to lean into some of these changes. You won't change the world by yourself by going meat-free for lunch today. But imagine the impact if everybody did it.
Yeah, that's right.
And the change flows from there. You can do it, Li Ling. I believe in you.
Oh, all right. Let's check back again next year.
Okay, it's quiz time. It's your favorite time of the podcast, I'm sure.
Woohoo! This one's fun. Okay.
Okay, a repeat of the question. Can you rank these 4 foods by the greenhouse gases emitted during their production? We've got chicken, we've got rice, we've got cheese, and coffee. So I want you to lock it in from the best food for the planet and up.
So the best food for the planet, I think will be cheese.
Okay, cheese locked in at number 4.
And then coffee.
Okay, coffee locked in at 3.
And then chicken.
Okay, chicken at 2.
And the worst, with the biggest carbon footprint, is rice.
Okay, interesting answers. I'm sorry to tell you, none of them are in the correct place. But it is difficult. It's difficult. I haven't made it easy for you. Okay.
right.
So coming in at number 4, the best for the planet from an emissions perspective, it's rice.
No way!
Yeah.
No way! We were just talking about this in the last episode about how it's so intensive, energy intensive.
It is
water
intensive. It's
Getting
not off
worse
the hook.
because of the weather and the drought and the heat wave and this huge dependence.
It's not off the
on
hook.
rice.
It is responsible, you're right, for a lot of methane. And also, globally, about 30% of total fresh groundwater is being used for rice cultivation, which is staggering and kind of separate from emissions. So a lot of work is needed on fixing up how we grow rice. But for this question, it's the best. That's telling you something.
Wow, yeah.
3rd place, it's chicken.
No way!
Chicken coming in 3rd. Probably the most widely consumed meat. It's less carbon intensive normally than even farmed fish or prawns, for example. Its impact in terms of carbon footprint is way lower than beef, which is probably no surprise the worst food in terms of emissions. Okay, coming in 2nd place, it's cheese. Obviously, it has natural connections to the dairy industry and with cattle. So that's why it's sitting up there in 2nd place. And the highest emitting of our food selection today, it's coffee.
No way!
And we've spoken a lot about the milk that we put in our morning brew, but not much about the beans themselves. Simple reason, land use changes. Forests being turned into plantations. And the high amounts of energy and fertilizers used in commercial production. And then also the transportation of beans from remote parts of the world to literally every corner of the planet. And coffee's on the rise globally, so I think
This is depressing.
maybe a topic for another podcast in the future.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, is there anything we can eat or drink that doesn't ruin the planet? Seriously.
Looking at this study, the best food is citrus fruits. So stick to your oranges, your lemons, your limes, and you'll be fine.
Lemons and lemonade.
Okay, that's it for Climate Conversations this week. Have you got some ideas for topics you'd like to discuss, like the impact of coffee? Hit us up or send through a comment or a suggestion.
And you can subscribe or give us a star or 5-star rating too on whichever podcasting platform you're using. We'd be thrilled if you did. Until next week, I am Liling Tan.
And I'm Jack Board. Thanks for listening.